Hey man!
Watch out! It's a woodpecker from space! To the hips, or you can say the gluteus as well, it's too thin, and one of the things that's happening is that because he's putting much of his weight on that right cheek, there's going to be a lot more padding here. But since he's a male and he's very fit, that means that the hips are going to be very thin in relation to the waist. I would say the great trochanter. And if you emphasize it and you put it in there, you should be able to find it in your sculpture later on. It should be right in the middle. You don't have to make a lot of detail. So I'm using multiple tools and just kind of scraping. So one of the things we're going to be concentrating now is the lower legs, and I'm not trying to do a lot of detail, but what I am trying to do is build it up enough so I can have the mass of the lower leg match the thigh. You have to kind of take a measurement with your eye from the bone here, let's say the patella, to the bone here, or the malleolus. So what I like to do is, like, after I lay some clay down, I'll just use this to remove just the surface. I'll put a lot of detail into sculptures, but that's like towards the end. We need to work a little bit on the chest, and this is a very complex area because you have the deltoid wrapping around here, and then over here the acromion is also part of the clavicle. So this is going to be one of the things I always struggle with. And of course then you have your sternocleidomastoid and your trapezius. But another thing is that in this reference pose, there's not a lot of reference looking at the chest, which is going to be very limited. You should be able to kind of push it and move it a little bit, but I might have to pull out that rod. And then if I do that, I'm going to have to build out the trapezius because that's going to support our neck. So pectoralis comes down pretty far, but it's a very big shape on here. A little bit more to the lower arm, straighten it out. If there's any high spots, just kind of push them together. It's good to kind of push your clay together, otherwise like you could develop some cracks. Don't go too far into making details for the head. It's really not important at this stage, but I want to indicate some of the planes of the head, and I'm going to just do it really quick because I want to be able to give them some sort of rudimentary expression when I'm sculpting. And I also want to be able to see, if I put some features, what part I need to increase in size. One thing that you should actually get in the habit of sculpting the skull. Right over here, we're going to add, and I've done plenty of portraits on the channel, so if you're interested in doing a portrait, I do have. PZ is good because it will hold up the head, but not clay. So there's a lot more things that are holding the head up. I'm not going to work on the ears just yet, especially on this left side. This foot and moving it slightly over, and you should use your wire tool if you have it. If not, you can just position it. In a way, this is kind of good because I can create the direction for the foot. It's a very nice direction. The parts that I don't like, even in the photo itself, are this position and the one on the head. So right over here, it's kind of like a really crappy look. This is our third session. You can see I'm adding a lot more muscles to the back. I am bringing out the fullness of the back muscles. I did have to expand this right shoulder, and I think I might have to move the arm, or at least the bone, the chromium this way, because the arm is a little bit too thin for his torso at the moment. But I think I can still kind of get away with it. It should be easy enough to kind of push it over, just using a tool and pushing slowly. I should be able to push it. Of course, you've got to have this middle in here. And one of the things that people tell you, and you can see this in antique sculptures, is having this, a furrow, is a depression, making it flatter. People tend to just keep it like in a sharp edge, but you should actually make it flat like this, even using a tool. Most of your planes, whenever you see a muscle, you should try and separate the muscle So this is the shoulder girdle here, and you can see the shoulder is doing something completely different from shoulder to shoulder depending on where the arm is. So this one's like very far back, and this one is all the way over here. When we keep going this way, our thigh, I bulked it up a little bit more, so it's starting to have a little bit more mass throughout. And if you do make it more mass, you should start from the bottom up, especially on these wet terracotta clays, because there is no armature. And you can see, even without having any armature, we do have a very dynamic pose. It's very susceptible to falling and cracking and all of that, because that is just the nature of water-based clay. But one of the things you could do is fire it in pieces if that worries you. This is a very small sculpture if you look at my hand. So it's about, what is it, like 10 inches tall, maybe 10, 15 inches. And diagonally it's bigger. So in the final process, the hollowing out is not going to be that hard. And one of the things I do is, like the base here, I'll hollow it out. And then I'll take a drill with a very long bit, and I'll just kind of like move it up through the back and to remove it. And you can make a hole here, remove the clay from there, but we don't want to do that just yet, because when you start hollowing it out, it makes the sculpture dry at different rates, and you do want to keep the moisture in the clay. But if you did that, you would be struggling. So another thing to note is that I did give it a little bit of an expression, so he does have a face. It's going to be different, but I kind of like that chiseled, very high cheekbone sort of face, as opposed to the softer face that he has. I think this makes it a little bit better. Also, this pose is starting to resemble a motif that is kind of good of Hermes and one of the river god themes. And the river god themes would be nice because you can have something here as a prop, maybe like a bucket of water or a fountain, and that could be your supporting tool that you use to keep the clay up. But I haven't decided yet. Another important thing is to drape some cloth over this leg and make it a little bit stronger, but I think that hides the figure a little bit. But this is our session for today, and I'll be continuing this, and you can see it's starting to liven up. I'm probably going to emphasize a couple of things, like maybe exaggerate this leg, maybe put it a little bit forward or even backwards. I think if I move the leg backwards, it might be a better pose.